Hey guys, it's Steve for CollectorMania here, continuing the 32 series. We're on to Jund, so that's pretty exciting. So Jundum. We are leading on here with Sek'Kuar. I'm not sure how to say his name. Deathkeeper. He's a orc shaman, 4/3 for 5, 2 colorless, and then Jund, of course. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 3/1 black and red Graveborn creature token into play with haste. Sorry, all tongue-tied. So he's pretty cool. It's different. I had a Prosh deck built for a really long time. I decided to go with a different angle on this. Just because, well, I guess it's the same angle, just different commander. Prosh is just overplayed in my opinion. I mean, he's everywhere, so... And there's a reason. He's really, really good. You'll see he's actually in the deck, so he's featured as well. But this guy's just different. You know, he came in that commander set, so different artwork. That's part of the reason I turned over to him, just because his old artwork is terrible. This one is actually really cool, so... Anyway, that's Sek'Kuar. Jumping into our creatures here, first we've got Viserys here. Having those sack outlets that are free are really important, of course, and this is probably one of the best ones in the entire deck. The scry does come in as well, especially if somebody's about to board wipe. You can just scry until you find what you need, essentially. So, really, really cool card. Always been one of my favorites. After that, we've got a Generator Servant. This card is actually pretty awesome in this deck. You can basically sack it and then play pretty much any of your big stuff. And you'll see the deck is actually pretty top heavy, so this is actually really important for that. Other than that, he's just a 2/1. He's just a little guy who does what you need him to do. And then we've got a Grim Harrow. How do you say that?
Harrowspecs?
Harrowspecs, yeah. As you'll see, there's a few words in here that I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce right. So anyway, it's got Morph. I never use it for that. The real ability that we're looking for here is whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card, which is also what our commander triggers off of. So just a way to generate a lot of card advantage and then, you know, get those that sacrifice engine going. So there's that. Then we've got Yavimaya Grandeur. This card is actually pretty interesting. It's like a it's not a Wood Elves, but it's we'll compare it to Wood Elves anyway. It comes in, grabs you land from your library, and then it self-sacrifices the next turn. So if you don't have a sack outlet, this guy can actually, you know, just get rid of himself for you, unless you pay the echo cost, which I don't think you will for this one. Okay, after that we've got Anger. Really good card to sacrifice early, put in your graveyard, give all your guys haste. I actually really need to pick up a Brawn for this deck now that I think of it. Okay, and then we've got Mina and Dien Wildborn. At one point this deck was actually built around landfall. It's kind of shifted from there, but I've just found that this card is good enough to keep in here. It's you know, not quite as good as like Oracle Moldiah, but still definitely has a place. You know, as long as you've got extra lands in your hands, you can end up playing them. You can return lands to your hand to give something trample. You know, it's just a really cool card. I've actually run it as a commander before as well. Just interesting. And then we've got a little bit of board control with Olivia Valdarin. This card is absolutely bonkers. I've built commander decks around this as well, and they are pretty effective. Other than that, 3/3 flying vampire that makes itself bigger and, you know, grabs your creatures from your opponents that you can sacrifice to your for your commander and get tokens from. Really, really cool. Then we've got another really big one that's Ghoul-Caller Gisa. This card has actually recently shot up in price. I was really surprised to look at it the other day. I think it's like $15 or something like that. Crazy. And it makes sense. It's great as a commander. It's also just really good in decks like this where you can sacrifice a creature and make X 2/2 zombies equal to its power, I believe. Yeah. So just a way to generate an army really, really fast, especially with, once again, some of the top-heavy creatures in here that you're going to want to sacrifice anyway. And then we've got kind of a dirty combo in here between Nath of the Guiltleaf and Sadistic Hypnotist. I know several videos I talked about my Nath deck and how I basically had to stop running this combo because my playgroup hated me for it. So I just included it in here, just as kind of a surprise for those people that hate that combo. So I'm excited to someday do that. A little bit of hand control, just a really cool creature. And then once again, going back to the landfall that this deck was, we've got the Get Rog monster in here as well. I think at one point this guy will move out when I do decide to do another landfall deck, but for now he's good in here. He does what you want him to do, which is, you know, generate some card advantage. You don't really mind sacrificing a land here and there, and then if you don't want to sacrifice a land, you can always just sacrifice him. So not a bad course of play here. 6/6 Death Touch as well. And then we've got a recursion creature in Vorapede, so you sack it to an ability, get a token, and then you can have it come back with Undying, and then it just comes back, and now you've got a Vigilance Trample 6/5, so pretty good. Okay, plus it's just one of my favorite cards from that block, I guess. And then we've got a Bloodshot Cyclops. A really good sack outlet, a lot of fun. As mentioned before, I really actually like with Vorapede, this works really well because you can just toss a Vorapede at somebody's face and then have a undying token or undying creature Vorapede come back. So Bloodshot Cyclops, really, really cool. Then, as we talked about before, Prosh Skyrider of Kerr. Really cool card, really, really good sack outlet. Another one of those free sack outlets that comes with an upside of bringing a whole bunch of tokens into play for you. So, really, really cool card. And then we've got Reaper from the Abyss, a really good synergy with this type of deck as well. You're sacrificing creatures, so you can usually do it anytime you want, so you can always make sure that you trigger the Morbid on him and get rid of any threats around the board. So, and you can do that every turn, of course. Just a really cool card. 6/6 flyer, really good. And then we've got Stalking Vengeance. This, in a lot of ways, is a win condition. If you can get him out with a board, your opponents can't board wipe you, and as long as you have a sack outlet, you can kind of control what happens with, the way things are sacked and all kinds of stuff like that. So you can basically nuke off, like, the biggest threat, like the person that's playing control. You're just like, well, I'll just deal you, 40 points damage and you're dead, Really, really good card in the deck. Then we've got Scourge of Toth. I included this guy mainly because he can recur really easily just by sacrificing 2 tokens and then putting it back on the board, paying 2 black. I don't know. I haven't really gotten to play with him yet, but I'm excited to try it out, so we'll see what happens there. And then we've got this deck's Craterhoof, and that's Decimator of Provinces, of the provinces. Of course, I can't afford a Craterhoof for each and every one of my decks, so having a kind of budget option of this is actually really cool. Plus, it comes with the added tagline of having the Emerge, so you can actually sacrifice something to get him out and then generate that token or whatever sacrifice advantage you're looking for. And he's not, of course, as good as Craterhoof, but he definitely will win you the game if, once again, you have enough little tokens. Like if Nath has been sitting out for a while, or you just have a way to generate a whole bunch of little guys. So, really cool card. Definitely recommended if you're looking for a budget version of Craterhoof. Okay, so from that, we are on to our artifacts. There are only 2 in the deck. We've got a Birthing Pod and a Skull Clamp. Birthing Pod is the feature card, but as you'll see on the side, since there are only 2, they'll both show up at the same time. Birthing Pod, really, really good toolbox card. You can basically grab whatever you need. There are a lot of pieces in here that are really essential to your deck kind of working, as an engine. So just being able to tutor them up when you can is really, really effective. Plus, I've definitely taken that course of action where I just get a token, sacrifice it to go find Viserys here. That way, just have like a free sack outlet. So there's that as well. And of course, Skull Clamp. I mean, you'd be a fool not to include it in a deck like this. You're sacrificing things left and right, so it's probably one of your best ways to generate card advantage. Okay, so on from our artifacts, we are on to our enchantments. First up, in my opinion, is Pernicious Steed. I only have 1 copy of this card, and it's because it was expensive for a very long time, then it got reprinted in Conspiracy, got a little bit cheaper, but I've just never... Now there are some other things that do this a little bit better, but for its time, Pernicious Steed was an amazing card, and it still is, but it did something that not a whole lot of other things did, which is, I'll actually read it for you. It's X, and then sacrifice Pernicious Steed. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with converted cost X or less. So it's just a really effective, almost board clear. I mean, you just get rid of a whole bunch of threats, a whole bunch of problems on the board. Your deck doesn't really care about it because, you're not running a whole lot of, well, you are running a lot of enchantments, but you're not running a whole lot of artifacts, and your creatures dying isn't a big deal. Get tokens for that. So just a really cool card, kind of a throwback. And then we've got Uvenwald Mysteries, another way to generate tokens, and another way to kind of generate card advantage with clue tokens. So interesting include. Plus, I kind of leave it in here as that argument against like swords and stuff like that, because this way you can generate a white creature essentially with the token, so you can block like a Sword of Feast and Famine, which this deck can't really do that easily most of the time. So just a fun include. Yep. And then of course we've got Greater Good. This card in this deck is crazy as long as you can kind of get around, the discard effect. But it is a graveyard deck, so it does kind of work with that as well. So if you haven't ever played with this before, I recommend it. And pretty Carador loves this. Pretty much any of the graveyard decks love this card, and it's kind of harder to get a hold of, but I think it's not that expensive. But who knows? I think wasn't it reprinted into Modern Masters?
I believe so. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that. If you know, make sure to make a comment about it, and if it hasn't been, it should be. So, and then we've got Tooth and Claw, kind of the enchantment version of our commander. So if you sacrifice 2 creatures, you get a 3/1 red beast creature token onto the battlefield. So another free sack outlet. You do have to be a little bit careful because you do have to sacrifice 2 creatures instead of 1. So I've always found it kind of effective just to generate 2 of those Uvenwald human tokens and then make them a little bit stronger. So interesting card. Definitely a budget include there though. Okay, from that we are on to our instant speed spells. We've got Harrow, just a really good way to generate, some mana ramp, and it's just kind of fun to do at the end of somebody's turn because not a whole lot of ramp spells are instant speed. So just a nice little include there. And then we've got our Divergent Transformations. This is a newer card from, I believe, the last Commander set. It's got Undaunted, which means it costs 1 less for each opponent, so some of those Battlestar games, this becomes really, really cheap. Normally, 4 off, it's going to cost 3, so it's actually pretty good. But anyway, it's exile 2 target creatures. For each of those creatures, its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card, puts that card on the battlefield, then shuffles his or her library. Wow, wordy there. It's really good removal for things that you can't normally get rid of, like Avacyn's and stuff like that, because this deck doesn't really have a whole lot of exile effects. But it's also really fun just to have 2 tokens sitting there not doing anything, and then you just exile them and grab 2 of your best creatures out of your deck. I mean, you can't select them, but most of the time it's going to flip up something that you want. So, really interesting card. I have played it a few times and had some really good results, and played it a few times and had some really bad results. But like I said, in this deck, it's pretty much whatever goes. You can usually work with whatever piece the deck gives you. Okay, from instants, we're going into our sorceries. We've got a Far Wanderings. Once again, graveyard decks really love this card. It's basically, it's got Threshold on it, so if you have 7 cards in your graveyard, it actually gets a little bit better. And the buff here is that it actually grabs you more lands, so really, really cool card. I recommend it for Carador, once again, any kind of graveyard strategy. On from that, we've got Decimate. This is one of the weirdest but best types of removal cards there are. It's kind of tricky because you have to have one of each of the types listed on the card in order to even cast the spell. So sometimes you could be sitting with it in your hand just like, I need somebody to play an enchantment so I can just destroy it. And I've even actually played an enchantment just so I can play the spell. So I mean, it's interesting, but it definitely solves a lot of problems for you at once. For 4 mana at sorcery speed, it's not that bad. So there's Decimate. And then we've got an Ever After, a little bit of recursion. Really cool card, grabs 2 creatures out of your library, or out of your graveyard, and then it also shuffles itself back into your library, so it's, I guess, recurable that way. And plus it, most of the time grabbing 2 creatures, depending on where you are on board state, will actually win you the game sometimes, so really, really cool. Okay, after that we've got a Hellion Eruption. This is a way to kind of sneak a win sometimes. You just, I've actually done this with the Stalking Vengeance, where you just sacrifice all your tokens, deal everybody a bunch of damage, and then get a whole bunch of 4/4s for the swing, for the swing next turn. So I've definitely won the game that way before. If no one has a board wipe in their hand, you've basically just won. So Hellion Eruption. Okay, and then there are 2 lands that I really wanted to talk about. The first is Grim Backwoods. A sack outlet on a land is always really, really good. We've talked about utility that way a million times before, but it just makes sense to, I call them lands that are, well, they're called utility lands, but it's like having a spell on a land. So really, really cool, really effective. This one actually is really, really good because it draws you a card, so it generates card advantage. You're not taking up a spell slot for it. It's really awesome. And then we've got a man land and Hissing Quagmire. Just another include that I want to talk about. I include manlands when I can. I don't generally like the way that they have to come in tapped most of the time, stuff like that. But in this type of deck where if it dies on the swing, it just generates a token, it's actually like you're not losing a whole lot. I mean, you are because you're losing a land, but you're still kind of generating a guy and all this other stuff. So just a nice include there. So anyway, that is Sek'Kuar, Deathkeeper. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe as always, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.